We return to the Showa era with something a tad different as we follow Ichiro and Minya on their Monster Island adventure and Godzilla takes on the environment? It's All Monsters Attack and Godzilla vs. Hedorah right here on the Atomic Lizards podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Atomic Lizards. We're a trio of friends podcasting about the Godzilla franchise and other films we love. I am Miranda, the film fanatic.
I'm Udi, the de facto film expert.
And I'm Dan, the Kaiju extraordinaire.
On today's episode of Kaiju Korner, we're covering All Monsters Attack from 1969 and Godzilla vs. Hedorah from 1971. The Monsterverse was super fun, and we're ready to go back in time to the Showa era. First up is All Monsters Attack.
Ichiro Miki is a child living in the industrial district of Kawasaki, where his parents' constant struggle to make ends meet often leaves a schoolboy alone. Constantly teased by a bully nicknamed Gabara, his only friends are toy consultant Shinpei and fellow classmate Sachiko. Ichiro turns to escape his dreams of Monster Island, where he befriends the equally bullied Manila.
All Monsters Attack is a 1969 Toho film directed by Ishiro Honda and written by Shinichi Sekizawa and produced by Tomoyuki Tanaka. It is the 10th film in the Godzilla franchise. The film stars Tomonori Yazaki, Kenji Sahara, and Hideo Yamamoto, with special effects by Honda and Teruyoshi Nakano.
This episode will have spoilers, so go watch it if you haven't. Now let's get started. What are your initial thoughts on this very short Godzilla movie? Dan, do you want to start us off?
Well, I think what you just said, Miranda, is the one good thing that I personally feel this movie has going for it. It's short. And it is thankfully short because, now this is just my personal opinion, but we're starting to head into the bad Showa era films. Now, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, as I'm sure we'll discuss, kind of has a bit of a cult following in the fan base. Like, there's actually quite a few people that really do enjoy that movie, but like, I think we can all agree that All Monsters Attack is one of the worst, if not the worst film in the franchise. Just like I said, the only good thing it has going for it is its length, because it's super short, but otherwise there's just not a lot that happens in this movie. I mean, yeah, we follow Ichiro around, he has the typical, school elementary kid problems, which, not to downplay it, bullying really is an issue for some kids. Like, don't get me wrong, but we've just seen it in just so many movies that, it's not really anything different here. It does go to a place that I wasn't expecting. Like, there's a point where Ichiro gets kidnapped, and that's a whole part of the story. And to be fair, I was not expecting something like that to happen. But I mean, that's about as interesting as it gets. And yeah, most of the Godzilla stuff comes from Ichiro's dreams, because he likes to dream about being on Monster Island and hanging out with Minya and whatnot. But unfortunately, a lot of the footage on Monster Island is just stock footage. Like, they borrow from Ebra, Horror of the Deep. They borrow from Son of Godzilla. They just use a lot of stock. There is some new footage. I should say that, it's not all just completely stock footage. There is some new footage. I think the battle with Gabara, everything that has Gabara in it is all new footage, because Gabara is a new monster for this movie. But other than that, most of it's just stock footage. And then what isn't stock footage is just following Ichiro and his day-to-day life. And I don't know, I personally didn't find Ichiro to be that interesting. And I wasn't that invested in his story to really care. So yeah, I don't really like this one. It is probably my least favorite film in the Godzilla franchise. I mean, I have to rewatch the anime trilogy, if I'm being honest, because I don't really like the anime trilogy either. And like I said, the one good thing that this movie has going for it is it's short, so you don't have to put up with it for that long. What about you guys? What did you think of All Monsters Attack?
Yeah, I think he kind of hit every main point, so I'll keep this short. But I mean, I don't know. This is a hard one. I would say that the movie with Manila I forgot the name of it. I think that one's worse than All Monsters Attack. I can't, it's been a long time. I can't say by how much, but I would say that I think that one's a lot worse than All Monsters Attack. That being said, as you mentioned, the saving grace of All Monsters Attack is the fact that it is so short. I feel like being like that really helps it out.
Yeah, and I just want to comment. The movie you were thinking of was Son of Godzilla, and
That's right.
Like I enjoy Son of Godzilla more than I do All Monsters Attack, but I can completely understand why you would find that movie worse because once again, like you just said, All Monsters Attack is short. Son of Godzilla is not as short as that. So like if you really don't enjoy Son of Godzilla and it's longer than an hour, like yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, I really do feel like the length really helps out here. I will say that talking Manila so much worse than regular Manila. Very weird, very jarring. Yeah, I don't. It was not what I was expecting.
So I got a question for you then. Did you watch the Japanese original or the English dub?
Of All Monsters Attack,
Yes.
the Japanese.
Gotcha. Because they do have an English dub of this, and Manila does have a voice in the English dub, and it is yeah, it's something.
Is it weirder or worse than the Japanese one?
It's pretty weird.
It's a choice.
Yeah, it's a choice. Yeah, it's weird. Like he talks like this.
No,
like,
not the Barney voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's about as much as I could. Yeah.
So for having the Japanese version be voiced by a woman, and so it's more of that like kid octave makes way more sense for Manila
Yeah.
than whatever the American voice is.
Yeah, I kind of want to watch the American one now, but I also I don't.
Just look up clips on YouTube.
Yeah, that's the right call. I'll do that. The Japanese one was like, it wasn't a bad voice. It was just a choice. I was not expecting it. So when she started talking, I was like, oh, okay. Or when Manila started talking, I was like, oh, okay, interesting. Not what I expected for this movie. I think I knew I think you told me, I think even on the podcast, I think you mentioned that they talk, I think in this movie, but I forgot because it's been so long. So I was like, oh, all right, well, that's where we are. All right, okay, cool. But I mean, I guess technically speaking, it's not canon because it was all a dream or all his imagination, all Ichido's imagination. So who's to say? But I will say I thought the part there was a part that I thought was funny with Manila, that he's like, Ichido's like, oh, I thought you'd always be with Godzilla. And he's like, no, he gets mad. And I was like, yeah, that's right. You little piece of crap. I'm sorry, I'm being mean.
You really don't like Manila, do you?
I feel like I'm leaning more into the bit at this point. Like,
yeah.
it's not that I really truly hate him, although in Son of Godzilla, oh my god, that was terrible. But I like to lean into the bit just for fun. But yeah, the movie itself though wasn't that bad. Again, really helped out with the runtime, but it was interesting. It just felt kind of like a Saturday morning special, like something you would watch as a kid. Which, granted, I mean, this is made for kids, definitely, so it makes sense. But yeah, I thought it was interesting, and I feel like if I had watched this as a kid, I probably would have liked it. It probably would have resonated with me. That being said, I don't hate it. I don't think it's bad. It's not amazing. Overall, though, this movie was kind of fun, very short and very brief. Had some kind of fun monster moments, which honestly, they reused some footage. It might have been from other movies. I don't know, but otherwise, it wasn't too bad. I thought I was a lot more worried about this one going in, and then after I finished, I was like, all right, that wasn't that bad. Or, again, maybe we've watched so many of these that my tolerance has just built up, but I didn't think it was that bad. And again, maybe it helped that it was really short, but who's to say?
I just want to say real quick that I might have reversed hyped you up for this movie. I might have over exaggerated how bad it was, that when you watched it, it really wasn't that bad.
Maybe. I'm kind of curious to see what I'll think of Final Wars now too, because like you said that's like one of your favorites or like your favorite, but you also said it's like a terrible movie, so I'm intrigued.
Yeah, it's a fun bad movie in my opinion. But
is it kind of like Godzilla X Kong.
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
I would compare it to that. Yeah.
All right. I'll probably like that one then. But yeah, what about you, Miranda?
So I did not hate this one as much as Dan seems to dislike it. And I thought it was pretty medium. I still dislike Manila, and I do think that Son of Godzilla is worse than this one. I just really hate Manila and his dying donkey sounds. So the fact that he talks in this one is quite pleasant to the ears. I mean, that's kind of mean, but like, I really can't stand his sounds.
His
Like-
dying donkey is 100% accurate.
Yeah, like, just stop, please. I'm begging you. Talk like a human. I will take that any day. But like we've been saying, it's like really short and it had plenty of monster fights, which is what you look for in a kaiju movie, although they can be kind of long. And it is mostly stock footage from other Godzilla movies, but it's used in interesting ways. It fits the story. It's not like it's just 10-minute scenes thrown in there for no reason. Like, there's a reason they're in there or have been like chopped up, which we might get into later on in the discussion. It's just a quick little watch and has a message of standing up to bullies, which makes sense because this movie is very much directed towards kids. So overall, it's a decent watch. Like, don't expect Godzilla -1, but like, it's better than some other movies. So overall, not too bad. But let's get into our discussion a bit more. Did you guys find the shift from the final movie of Destroy All Monsters to this film about a boy who faces his bully and gets kidnapped by robbers like jarring, or just like in a general sense? Because we're covering the American films and now we're right in the middle of the Showa era at the beginning of the 70s.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Like, so I personally was not really weirded out by it because, well, I've seen this movie before and I had watched it well before I had seen any of the MonsterVerse movies. So like I already knew kind of what to expect, but I will say, like, if I were to like travel back in time to the 70s to Japan and I was watching these movies as they came out, I do think it would be a little weird to go from something like Destroy All Monsters and then take a little bit of a break because that's what happened, and then like this be the next film. Like, I do think that is kind of an odd shift because like you go from this like worldwide like somewhat finale movie where they literally get like all the monsters together to like fight, and then you go to this much like smaller budget movie where like you could tell that they didn't have the budget that they did before because most of it's stock footage and whatnot, and like yeah, they're really aiming for like a much younger audience. So I could definitely see it being jarring to go from Destroy All Monsters to this movie back then. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely in the 70s, going from Destroy All Monsters to All Monsters Attack. Definitely. I could definitely see if that like rubbed people the wrong way, especially with this like very popular franchise. Like, we're in the 21st century, so we have, we can reflect on it. We're not in the moment. But I didn't really find it that jarring because it is kind of just kaiju fights that happens a lot in all of the movies. So, I mean, the only thing that was maybe a little weird was the fact that it focused around a little boy, but it's not like these movies haven't focused around a child at some point or another. But it's definitely a change, but I think that comes from the situations that were going on at the time. So like kaiju movies were getting less funding and started to drop off on the popularity trends. And TV was started to get more popular as well. It was like on the rise. So a lot of things were shifting to that. So for this to be like a short hour-long film makes sense because that's 2 half-an-hour TV like blocks. So if they were going to put it on TV, like it makes sense why it's so short. But this film was also made for a film festival that caters towards kids. I believe it's called the Champion Film Festival. So to have that very specific change makes sense because they are making this one specifically for children. I think there's just a lot of like situations that's where going on that could cause this to be jarring for someone. And I think if someone who has only watched like Godzilla 54 and Godzilla -1 sat down to watch this, they'd be like, what is going on? What is this weird nonsense? Like, this is like off the walls crazy. I mean, the next movie we talk about is going to be crazier than this one, but like, this is the start of the weirdness, which I'm okay with. I like it.
It's been kind of a minute since we watched some of these, especially since we watched the last movie before this one. So to me, it's hard for me to say whether or not it feels jarring because I don't really remember, to be honest. I mean, this one's definitely more silly and definitely much more child oriented than the previous one. So I guess in that regard it is, but these definitely have the sort of old style campiness that I remember from the movies before we kind of took our hiatus and watched the MonsterVerse one. So in that regard, it felt like it was like going right back to where we were kind of, but yeah, I mean, definitely stylistically, like this is much more geared towards young children, and the other one I remember not feeling quite like that. So I guess kind of jarring, but not that jarring, if that makes sense. At least to me.
This question may have been better if we stuck through Showa the entire time. But I was just curious on how you guys were feeling about the shift, because sometimes you can have a franchise that's really good and then all of a sudden a new movie comes out and the rest of the whole franchise from that point on also kind of sucks. And you can apply that to several things, such as the MCU, the DCEU. You could apply that to Star Wars even. So I wonder how many more shifts we're going to have in the Godzilla franchise and whether or not those will be jarring or not jarring as well. Because eventually the original crew is going to step down or things are going to get shuffled and we're going to have a new crew in here on doing the Godzilla movies. It's all very fascinating to me.
I guess the biggest thing with like the Showa era is that to me the most jarring change is from the original to like the subsequent ones. Like I would say even the one right after the original one isn't quite so crazy or anything, but like it only takes like a few of them after the original to get to sort of like the craziness. So I feel like that to me is like the most jarring change, at least from like this so far from what we covered.
Yeah, no, you're right, Udi. Like things get crazy like immediately after the original 54 film, because I mean you have Godzilla Raids Again, and Godzilla Raids Again tries to have a somewhat similar tone, but then it gets silly as soon as you get to the third film in the franchise, which is King Kong versus Godzilla. Like King Kong versus Godzilla is a pretty silly movie, you know? So like it gets silly like right then there. And some of the other movies that come after maybe aren't as silly, but yeah, it's like the tone shifts like right away.
I honestly totally forgot that Godzilla versus King Kong was so soon after. That's crazy. It was the third movie, or like the second movie after the original. That's wild. It was very silly though.
It was the third movie because the second one after was Godzilla Raids Again.
Well, I meant like 2 movies after the original is what I meant.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. That to me is, I feel like, the biggest change. And then like these subsequent ones go to varying degrees of like more silly, like less silly, silly in different ways, silly in other ways. But yeah, I would say like that to me is like the most jarring change in these original ones.
You know, if you think about it, the MonsterVerse is kind of the same way because you got Godzilla 2014, which really does try to take itself seriously and tell a more grounded story. But then immediately after, with Kong Skull Island and Godzilla King of the Monsters, it just goes off the rails. So that's kind of funny to think about.
I've never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. It is the very similar structure. I wonder if we'll see that in like the Heisei era or the Reiwa era, millennia maybe. I wonder if it's a trend.
Yeah. Well, like I'm pretty sure I brought that up before, but or maybe not on the podcast, but like just casual conversation maybe, but that's what like I'm so curious about like the sequel or sequels to -1 because I just feel like every time that there has been a genuine attempt to make like a serious Godzilla, it always ends up just like going off the rails slightly after, which like to some degree like you kind of have to because like in the original he's like Godzilla is the main antagonist. It's like trying to figure out how to take him down. Then in not Monarch -1 it's the same thing. It's like he's the antagonist. They're trying to figure out how to kill him, blah, blah, blah. But then, like, you can't just have him keep coming back. Like, you have to bring in other kaiju or you have to bring in other things that will then, like, lead Godzilla to kind of attack that thing, whether it be a kaiju or, like, something else, whatever it might be. So then I feel like inherently the things just become more silly and more over the top, and then it's like the same cycle over and over and over again. So I'm very intrigued to see what'll come with that.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point when you say that well, whenever like a serious attempt at making a Godzilla movie is done, like it kind of goes off the rails because, like you said, you kind of have to because if you do a very serious, very grounded Godzilla movie, like let's use -1 as an example, if you do something like that and you want to come out with a sequel, what exactly can you do that's not just going to be the same thing over again? Because if you do, let's say we do get a sequel to -1, and once again, it's just the main characters trying to figure out how to like stop Godzilla again. It's the same movie again. So like you gotta find ways to shake it up, and usually the only way to shake things up is to introduce other kaiju for Godzilla to fight.
Yeah, they could introduce new kaiju. They could also just have little Godzilla clones running around. I mean, they did kind of try that with Godzilla 98. But it could be somewhere that Godzilla -1 goes.
Well, that is something we've never gotten before, so like I don't know how I would feel about like little mini Godzilla clones running around, but I guess I would have to see it in execution to really get a vibe for it, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's what I want from that sequel. I don't know that there's any way that they could make that even remotely feasible or like obviously there's definitely suspension of disbelief with these movies, like obviously inherently, obviously, but little Godzilla clones might be too much. Even for me. I don't know. We'd have to see what the designs look like first, I guess, but like that might be pushing it a bit too far.
Fine, they'll figure it out. You know, it's not the weirdest thing in the franchise, though. It wouldn't be the weirdest thing in the franchise.
I mean, yeah. And I mean, I trust the team as long, like, assuming it's the same team that, you know, did -1. Like, I trust them. I'm sure that they'll figure something incredible out, but yeah, I don't know. That would, yeah, I mean, it probably wouldn't be the weirdest thing ever, but it would be up there. I don't know. That'd be kind of weird.
You guys are right. It would not be the weirdest thing the franchise has done. So,
like if the Godzilla, like the little Godzilla clones, I guess, like let's say, for argument's sake, why it's probably not, but like, what if it was like a zombie invasion, but it was just little Godzillas, and then Noriko was like their leader because she has that one little weird pulsating black thing in her neck, and then she's like the hive mind queen thing. I'm giving this too much thought, but
well, I would say that I agree with because we were just talking about okay, like that would not be the weirdest thing the franchise has done, but I agree with you, Udi. I don't want that for a -1 sequel. Like, that would be too much, in my opinion. Like, if you're going to make a sequel to -1, like, Noriko, like, or not even just that idea, just the idea of, like, Godzilla, like, little Godzillas running around, I think that would be too much for that movie, personally. But I don't know. I mean, we'd have to see what Takashi Yamazaki wants to do. I mean, if he truly felt like something like that could work and he could make it work, then who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Or they could do a 180 and make an hour-long kids movie like they did with this.
Please, no.
Now
Please.
that would be
We
jarring.
never know.
Please, I beg of you. Please, no.
Hey, I found All Monsters Attack's story kind of interesting. Even though it is heavily directed towards kids, I still found it interesting.
I'm going to be honest with you, Udi. I have such faith in Takashi Yamazaki that whatever he wants to do for the Godzilla -1 sequel, no matter how crazy it may sound, I have faith in him. And I think he could make it work. So,
I mean, like, I'm definitely willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. So, like, if some crazy plot synopsis leaked or something, and then, like, you told me about it, I'd be like, look, as crazy as it sounds, you know, I'll go see it, but I'm a little worried. But I mean, inherently, again, there's a huge suspension of disbelief going on every time that we go see a Godzilla movie. So I mean, even just like going through the plot of Godzilla X Kong, like there's like if you just read a plot synopsis of the things that happen in that movie, like that is the dumbest movie ever, but it is so much fun. So I mean, again, like this is. My thing is, like, I would like for them to attempt to try to make yet another serious movie, like in the tone or similar, like to a similar level of like tone that -1 achieved for the sequel. I would like for that to try to remain consistent, especially because if they could find a way to make either Godzilla or like just the kaiju like scary, like that would be really cool to me. But like obviously they don't need to. Like I'm not expecting that, but I would just be it'd be cool for someone to finally break the not really the curse, but like the loop of starting with a serious movie and then going immediately to like off the walls insanity. Like it'd be very interesting for them to keep a consistent like serious tone for like a trilogy. That'd be very cool. But I don't know. Like we've been saying, who's to say? We'll find out.
We'll definitely have to wait and see, and hopefully they'll do something interesting. I think a trilogy of serious, scary Godzilla would be really interesting, especially depending on how they did it. If they leaned in more into like the horror genre, as a genre that I don't particularly participate in, I think it would work really well. It would be kind of like Jurassic Park, like the horror elements from there.
Or even like Cloverfield.
Yeah, Cloverfield, that's a great example. I guess we'll see in the future what they'll do. But let's go back a bit to the past. Did you guys find the story in All Monsters Attack to be interesting? Like, I know it's short, there's a lot of reused footage, but like, was anything intriguing to you guys?
I found it interesting in the way that like they have all the kaiju stuff happen in this little kid's imagination. It was very Sucker Punch-y, like as in the Zack Snyder movie, but in a very different way.
A Zack Snyder directed Godzilla movie. What
No,
would that
stop.
be like?
No, thank you. Don't do
Please,
that.
no.
So much slow motion.
Oh God, no!
Like Godzilla
please.
destroys a building and the building's just collapsing in slow motion.
Like, look, we would get some awesome
need that.
visuals, but no, please, no, we don't need it.
No, thank you.
All right, but to answer your question, Miranda, and I apologize because I kind of sort of already answered this when I was giving my brief thoughts, but yeah, no, I really did not find the story to be that interesting to me personally. Like, I just didn't find Ichiro to be that engaging of a character for me because he just felt like any other like kid character that has to deal with bullies and doesn't really have too many friends, and like his parents are never there for him, yada yada yada. You know, I know this movie came out in the 70s, but by the time I watched this movie, I had already seen a ton of stuff with the same exact premise, so it didn't really grab me that much. And like I said, things do get kind of interesting when Ichiro gets kidnapped by those. Are they like Yakuza? I don't even remember, but
They're just criminals who stole like 50 million yen or something.
oh, okay, so they're just criminals. All right,
Yeah, they're just bad guys with
gotcha.
sunglasses.
Yeah, with the sunglasses, yes. But yes, you know, he gets kidnapped by these criminals, so it gets kind of interesting there, and like the stakes can get a little high because I mean, granted, this movie was made for kids, so it's not like they're gonna kill Ichiro or whatever, but still, you don't know what's gonna happen to Ichiro, so the stakes do get a little high right there. But that's as interesting as it gets for me because yeah, I did not really care for the dream sequences on Monster Island because a lot of it was stock footage, and the stuff that wasn't stock footage I didn't think really looked that good. So yeah.
Can you imagine if they had killed Ichido?
Oh my god. That would, you know what? I would give the
Be
movie
dark.
credit. That would be so dark and so
That would be so
unexpected.
dark.
That would be so unexpected. It's like, oh, they want to scar all these poor little Japanese kids.
Feel like, stay at home, be good kids.
Maybe don't run away into abandoned buildings.
Yeah. But
'Cause
he
that's
was a
the-
latchkey kid.
Yeah. Because that's how the criminals find him, because he finds the driver's license, so then they go after him.
Someone should make an edit with Olivia Rodrigo's driver's license to this movie. No, but in a more serious note, I just had this thought, and I don't genuinely think that this would be like an amazing idea or anything. And I don't even know if you two have watched this movie or remember it enough for it to even like mean anything. But it'd be kind of interesting if someone made a movie similar in structure to like the Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift, but instead of drifting, the troubled kids all went to Monster Island to hang out with the kaiju and befriended different kaiju, and you know that's what they spent time doing instead of drifting on the mountain. And then it was like they were training their kaiju to defeat Godzilla or something. I don't know. I mean, it's not, again, it wouldn't be a good movie probably, but I had that idea and I was like, that'd be kind of interesting.
Like How to Train Your Dragon?
I guess. Yeah, I guess.
I was thinking Pokemon, but with kaiju.
Oh yeah, Pokemon.
That
makes
that
sense.
is a better.
Throw
Yep.
Digimon in there too.
Oh yeah, Digimon. Digital monsters. Yes,
Sure.
that's exactly what it stands for.
I would have continued the rest of the theme song, but I don't remember what the words are.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't anyway. We don't want to get
Yeah.
copyrighted.
That's true.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, just to finish up my thoughts, I mean, yeah, it was an interesting enough story. I mean, again, once I realized that, I was like, or once I had the thought of like, I don't think any of the monster stuff is actually happening. I was like, this is kind of a nothing movie. This kind of means nothing. I guess if you wanted to show one person just a one-off old Godzilla movie, this wouldn't be the one you should show them. But I mean, this could be because, you know, it's nothing. But no, it's not terrible. It's fine. You know, it's fun. But yeah, I thought it was okay.
Show them the bad one first, so then they're always pleasantly surprised with the next one.
I don't know. I think if you showed someone this one first, they might not give you a second chance. This was short, but I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. Watch it on double speed.
You have no idea how much I wanted to try to watch it on double speed, but they don't have that option on HBO Max.
They do not,
Bastards.
unfortunately.
That would make these so much better. Again, though, it really wasn't that bad.
Yeah, to like kind of comment on what you guys just said, I would not recommend showing having this be the first film you show someone that has never seen a Godzilla movie before. But like Miranda said, you know, show them this and maybe they'll be pleasantly surprised with all the other movies. But yeah, I don't know about that, but
You never know, this might be someone's favorite Godzilla movie. It's clearly not ours, but it might be someone's.
to the one person out there that considers this their favorite Godzilla movie, all I ask is why.
Why is a good question. I can tell you guys why I found it interesting. Maybe not the fact that it's not my least favorite, and it's not my favorite, but I can tell you why I found it interesting. So you could view this movie in two ways. So, it's directed towards kids, which is different, and I found that a nice change, although a bit out there. But you can read this movie in two ways. Like, one way you can read it as a child. You could see that, oh, look at this kid, he's hanging out with monsters, he's learning how to stand up and fight his bullies, and those are like very common themes in children's media, how to deal with bullies, or there's always some kind of learning message within children's media. So you can see it from that view. But on the flip side, you can read it as a story about this kid who's being neglected and that his parents are never home, and that because of that, he ends up getting kidnapped and he has to learn to defend himself out of safety for himself. He has to learn how to get out of the situation because he's forced into that situation. And he doesn't really have anyone to defend him, so he basically has to grow up really fast because he's like an 8-year-old. But he has to basically be a mini adult in the situation, and take care of himself, even though he has his neighbor who helps out occasionally. He's by himself. So I don't know if you guys picked up on those two different ways of reading this story, but I think that's a interesting story that Honda is trying to tell, because it has something both for adults and for children, whereas it can be viewed by a variety of different people. Because some children's movies are just for children, but then you have other ones like Pixar does this all the time, where it's like, yeah, this movie is marketed towards kids, but really it has a message for adults too. So this one could be a message to the parents being like, hey, look, you got to take care of your kid. This is something that happens occasionally in society, and that really sucks. So maybe I'm thinking a little too deep about this, but I did notice those things while viewing this movie, and I don't know if you guys picked up on it or not.
Yeah, you do bring up some good points, Miranda. That's not something I really even thought about when watching this movie, but I could totally see Honda trying to incorporate those themes into this movie. So that's a pretty good observation.
Yeah, he likes to add messages into his films. So for him to have this makes total sense for his filmmaking.
On a slightly different note, but the same thing. I don't know anything about Ishito Honda's life or anything, but I'd be curious to see or to know if he had any children, somewhere in the last few years while before making this. Because if he did, I wonder if maybe that influenced him wanting to make a more child-friendly Godzilla movie. Maybe he wanted to be able to show his kids a movie that he did. So it might not be the case, but I'm just curious, because when I was thinking that while watching, I was like, and again, not that the other movies previous to this weren't also kind of for kids, but and since this is so kid specific, or definitely much more oriented towards kids, I do kind of wonder if maybe that was the case. But again, maybe not. Just a thought I had. Not like a Google search could, solve my question, but I didn't Google it.
That's what I'm trying to Google now. The first thing that shows up is that he did have 2 kids, but that's from tvtropes.org, so I don't know how accurate that is. But it doesn't say when they were born, so it's very possible. He was drafted into the Japanese army, the Imperial Japanese Army, in 1934. That's an interesting fact I didn't know about him. Yeah, his First kid was born in 1939. So let's do some quick math. How many years would that be?
Like 30.
Yeah, so
Like
I don't know if that
30.
answers your question, but there's an answer.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess no. Maybe he just wanted to make the movie.
Yeah.
Or maybe like the studio was like, hey, we want to break into this new demographic. We've been seeing that children really like these movies. Could you make a more kid-centric film? And then he was like, I mean, yeah, sure, I guess. So that could also be the case too.
Yeah. Oh, he started directing television in 1967. There's a lot to learn about Honda, but I would assume this is probably his shortest film. And throughout the film, they use a lot of Godzilla stock footage from previous movies. Were you guys aware of that beforehand? Like, how do you feel about that while watching? Did you notice, since we're so far removed from our Showa Part 1, specifically Udi, because Dan, I assume you've seen these a whole bunch of times.
You're right.
Like in my case, I was aware beforehand. But on my first viewing, I noticed it way more. But the second viewing for this episode, I didn't notice it as much because I was so far away removed from the original battles and the original fighting. But I think they used the stock footage in interesting ways. They cut it up. It's not just like 10-minute chunks. You know, they're using it to tell a story or modifying it in a way to fit the story better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat, and I kind of mentioned this in my initial thoughts. Yeah, to be honest, if you guys hadn't mentioned that there was reused footage for most of the battles, I would not have noticed at all. I mean, I might have been like, "Oh, it looks kind of familiar," but I don't take this the wrong way. It's not how I mean it, but I feel like at this point, most of the fights feel pretty similar. I'm assuming just because of the suitmation, like I mean, again, it's pretty constricting, so there was not like there's not a ton of moves that they can do. So at a certain point, it's like they kind of do the same moves over and over again. So like I don't feel like that helps in trying to tell what's new and what's old. But yeah, I had no idea. I couldn't tell any of this is the same. But I mean, again, it's been a while.
Yeah, and to add on to that you're totally right. Like eventually, you fight with these big rubber suits. Eventually, they are just going to start to feel similar because, like you just said, there's not a lot they can do because the you're pretty constricted to how you can move with these giant suits. So eventually, you're just going to start repeating yourself because there's just not much you can do with these.
And I will add, that's not to say that the scenes still aren't fun because they're the best parts of the movie, but I just figured I should add that because it's still fun to watch the fight. It's just if you like had me compare the footage here to like in another movie, and you're like, are these the same shots? I mean, if you're putting them side by side, I'd be like, oh yeah, but otherwise, you'd be like, I don't know, maybe. I wouldn't probably be able to tell, but I mean, yeah. Plus, like, they all have like a very filmic look because obviously they were shot on film and all that. So, like, they have a very similar aesthetic that they kept throughout the movies once they got in the color. So,
Yeah, they definitely have the same feel because they're probably using the same technology and same footage, or film, I mean, to make the new ones. So it just blends all nicely together. But you mentioned holding two pictures up and saying, if you could tell the difference. I thought of that meme that's like, tell me the difference between these two things, and it's like, it's the same thing.
yeah, that's a good one.
'Cause, I mean, in this case, it's literally the same thing.
I mean, yeah. But it's a good meme to call back to regardless.
Yeah. If we don't have anything else to add, it's time for our next film. So this next film is Godzilla vs. Hedorah from 1971, and it's known to Americans as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster.
I just want to add really quickly because you mentioned that Godzilla vs. Hedorah over here in America is known as Godzilla vs. the Smog Monster. All Monsters Attack, for some reason, is called Godzilla's Revenge here in America. And yeah, it's kind of weird because the Godzilla's not really taking revenge on anybody. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's a strange title.
He's taking his revenge on Manila by letting him fight his own freaking battles for once. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I mean, because I was talking with this about Miranda earlier. Like, technically, you could say that Ichiro took revenge on his bullies at the end of the movie, but that was Ichiro. That wasn't Godzilla. So I don't know.
Unless Ichido is a stand-in for Godzilla,
Possibly.
but yeah. Who's to say? I will say, though, that Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, like, that feels like a very old-timey, like, kaiju film title. So it's kind of cool in that way, but I feel like it's a much lesser title to Godzilla versus Hedorah, in my opinion. But in any case, Godzilla vs. Hedorah is about an ever-evolving alien life form that arrives on a comet from the dark, gaseous nebula and proceeds to consume pollution. Spewing mists of sulfuric acid and corrosive sludge, neither humanity nor Godzilla may be able to defeat this toxic menace.
Godzilla vs. Hedorah is a 1971 Toho kaiju film directed by Yoshimitsu Banno, with special effects by Teruyoshi Nakano. It is the 11th film in the Godzilla franchise. The film stars Akira Yamauchi, Toshi Kimura, and Hiroyuki Kawase, and features Haru Nakajima as Godzilla and Kenpachiro Satsuma as Hedorah.
So, what are your guys' initial thoughts on this movie? It's a strange one.
You are not wrong, Miranda. This is where things start to get a little weird. Yeah, so Godzilla vs. Hedorah. This is definitely one of the weirder entries in the franchise. And if I'm being completely honest, I'm not the biggest fan of it, unfortunately. And I know that this film actually does have quite a few fans, and I can understand why. Like, the premise is interesting. It's like an environmental message. You know, you got this monster that feeds off of pollution, so the premise from the get-go is a lot more interesting than what we usually get for most like enemy Godzilla kaiju. So, you know, I like the different themes that it has. This film also has a multitude of different like small animated segments in it, which help it stand out from other Showa era Godzilla films. So I thought that was kind of cool. This is also, because I guess you could argue that All Monsters Attack was the first one to really start this, but this is the first Godzilla film to really start portraying Godzilla as a hero instead of a destructive monster. So like this is when Godzilla really starts becoming like a giant Japanese superhero. And like, it's, you know, this is because this was a point in time, and especially with All Monsters Attack, where Toho was really starting to have its target audience be children. So like, they make Godzilla a hero. They give him this ridiculous like trumpet music whenever he shows up, you know? So it's interesting. And this movie does have like a lot of interesting imagery. Like, you got weird stuff like dancing fish head people at one point, but then you also got like really dark imagery, like that moment where Hedorah is flying over the city and like everybody like collapses and turns into skeletons. Like, that's pretty messed up, you know? So it's an interesting movie. I like the idea of Hedorah. I think he's a unique kaiju. But yeah, I thought it was kind of boring at times, and I just wasn't as into it as many other people seem to be.
On the note that you said of them trying to make Godzilla a good guy, isn't this the movie where like literally right at the start, the little kid is like, Godzilla's like my Superman or something like that?
Yes, Udi. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there is a kid. The main character kid does say something along those lines at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Because I remember like him saying that, and I was like, interesting. All right, sure, why not? Because like I know that he kind of does become that like throughout a few times in the course of these movies and whatnot. Um, so I just thought it was interesting that like right from the start we kind of started there. And I was like, all right, sure, why not? Um, but yeah, I guess just to give my thoughts on the movie really quickly. I actually really liked this one. I didn't know anything about this one. I'd seen Hedorah before, but I'd forgotten what it looked like. So seeing the different forms of Hedorah and then just getting the whole thing it was really cool. And maybe it was just like the whole 70s styling with everything going on, but there was a lot of different things that I liked. So, I mean, this being a very anti-pollution movie, very 70s, a lot of 70s thoughts and messaging here going on, and a lot of the imagery was very, very well done, very striking, very just, I mean, whoever hired Yoshimitsu, damn, they let them cook, because I really think that this is probably one of the better Showa era movies, which like again, like you said, you didn't really like this one, but like for me, I think this is probably one of my favorites of the whole era, if not of like all of them so far, honestly. I like that, similar to the original, in just this regard, only in this regard, it had something interesting to say outside of just like big monsters fighting, and like obviously the kaiju fighting is like a big thing, but I just really like that. I like the imagery, the animation, like you said, makes it stand out a lot, and I thought was interesting. It was used very interestingly. As always, like the performances are always, pretty on par. So that was what it was. But again, I think it was mainly just the design and the idea of Hedorah was such an interesting and different concept for these movies, from what we've seen. And like again, like you mentioned, the imagery, like it got pretty dark, which I mean I thought was really, really well done and illustrated the feelings of this topic at the time, and I mean even still now. And just yeah, overall, I think the idea of it is really cool. Like obviously the ending can be a little bit muddled, but yeah, I really like this one.
And to like add on what you were saying about Hedorah, like yeah, like the thing that is cool about Ghidorah is you could argue that Mothra was the first Godzilla kaiju to have different forms, but like Hedorah has like all of these different forms. Like it starts off as this like little like sea creature and then evolves into this much like bigger version of itself, and then it becomes like a flying version, and then it becomes like the smog monster that we all know where it walks on land. Like it's I do like Hedorah as a kaiju. Like I think Hedorah is a very interesting kaiju, but yeah, just the movie itself, I just personally didn't really feel worked that well for me. Mainly because, like I said, I just found it a little boring at times. But that's just me. I'm starting to feel like I'm the minority in the in not really enjoying this one. So
I just want to add really quickly that another aspect that I really like that is very like specific to the time period is like the intro sequence with like the woman singing and like the cool psychedelic sort of like oil splashing colorful effects in the background and all that. And that's also kind of redone a little bit in the club sequence a little bit, but just like all of that was very reminded me a lot of like James Bond, and also like Metal Gear Solid 3, which is also kind of an homage to like James Bond. So just lot of stuff here. I really, really like this movie.
So I think this is the weirdest one out of all of them that I've seen, and I've seen Godzilla 2000 Millennia, and I thought that was weird, but this one is way more weird than that one. And maybe it's because it's the early 70s, late 60s vibes. It's like hippies and psychedelic and like James Bond vibes. It flips back and forth very weird. Like you have a normal like family story into these like really strange animations or club scenes. And it's weirdly it's bizarre. Even though it's bizarre, it's interesting, and they definitely go a bit deeper into the darker side of like the story. With like Hedorah and the effects that Hedorah brings towards people. But in general, it's actually kind of interesting, and it's fascinating actually, because it is such a strange movie, and I don't dislike it. Like, I don't think it's bad or anything. And it has a very strong anti-pollution message, which most of these Godzilla movies have some kind of message, but this one is very clear because you see that right away with the song at the beginning of the movie where they're singing about pollution and chemicals and elements and stuff. And then we're introduced to Hedorah right away.
I just want to say real quickly that I really do like the song at the beginning of the movie, the pollution song. Like that is a nice song.
It is an interesting song. And it's definitely a choice to have your film open with it. And like it's relevant to the message of the movie, which is anti-pollution. Like, do not pollute the ocean and the air and all of this stuff, and that's why Hedorah comes to Earth. And so that message is relevant in the 70s, right? Is it still relevant today? I think it is still relevant today. If they were to remake this movie, I think they would have to change some things. Instead of like toxic sludge, it probably revolve around clean energy and making sure we have solar panels or wind or sustainable resources and energy, and things of that nature. Do you guys think it's still a relevant message for today?
I do think it's still a relevant message today because pollution and like climate change and everything that leads up to that, that's still an issue today. So I do agree. I think it is a relevant message today. And that's also something really interesting to think about, Miranda, because what if a Godzilla movie like this was made today? What would it be like? What would the message be? Would it be more surrounding clean energy, like you said, or would it be like something entirely different? I'd be really curious to know what that message would be like if it were made today. That's something to think about.
Yeah, I obviously agree. It's very, very much relevant to today. And I mean, unfortunately, because I felt like the time to act on making true change was in the 70s, and now we're 50 years separated from that time, and wow, things haven't gotten any better. Woo! But yeah, I think the message is still very, very relevant today, and the song is great. But on the note of Hedorah and like maybe making like a new version of this, I feel like that could potentially be a very interesting spot for the sequel to Minus One to go. I think that would be very rife with a very potentially interesting ideas if they were to do something like that, where like Hedorah were to become like the main antagonist and Godzilla were to fight him or whatever. I think that could be very interesting, especially in the modern lens and seeing a different sort of origin for Hedorah and all that. I think that could work out very well, especially with like an updated design and everything. That could be very, very cool. But that being said, yeah, I think a lot of the imagery here again was very, very well done, and I mean, in a way, like I don't know if it's, I mean, super overt or not, or maybe I'm reading more into it than maybe I should be. I don't know, but like I definitely took the sludge to very much mean like oil, because like in the 70s that was like a big thing, like fighting against oil and all that. I mean, and ever since then, I mean, we've had tons of oil spills and lots of problems with oil. And, you know, we should probably get away from using oil like they were trying to in the 70s, but didn't achieve because big oil fought back. But, yeah, I mean, I think seeing this monster basically made of oil and being such a detriment to humanity and the planet was very much interesting. I mean, pollution overall, sure, but I also think that oil played a big role in the movie and in like commentary on that regard. But yeah, I think again, I just feel that this movie has aged incredibly well just for its messaging alone, and some of the imagery here is very, very striking and will continue to be striking for a long time for sure.
It's strange how a film from the 70s is still relevant today, like with their message. But we definitely could be better as a society in like implementing systems to make sure we are being cautious and not having oil spills in the ocean and such. But you mentioned maybe a sequel to Godzilla Minus One with this type of message, and I would be very interested in seeing that. I think that was way better than the idea of little tiny Godzilla zombie clones. So
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, Godzilla Minus One tackled some pretty deep, like pretty intense stuff. So if they want to go in this direction, I would not be opposed to it.
I honestly couldn't agree more with both of you guys. Like, I think a premise with similar themes and messages would be perfect for a minus one sequel. I would like to see, I mean, that would be cool to see like a modern interpretation of Hedorah, like with, especially with like presumably the computer generated effects that they would use for a sequel to Minus One. That would be really interesting to see. I would love to see how Takashi Yamazaki and his team would design. Like, I want to see what their version of Hedorah would look like. I'd be down for that.
I wonder if they take suggestions. We could just write it and mail it to them. Be like, here, we have a new idea for you.
We'd have to learn Japanese.
I mean, we don't have to be involved. You just have to say, idea by Atomic Lizards podcast. That's it. That's all I need.
You hear that, Toho? Hire us.
We could just send them an envelope, and in the envelope, it's a link written on the paper, and it's a link to this episode with a time stamp.
So we could do that. We could do that.
But yeah, the I guess we're not being serious, but we could mail maybe like Toho, like their offices, be like, hello, we have this idea for the director of Minus One, whose names I always forget, and the team. If you guys are interested, for free, here you go for you.
But once again, would we have to write the letter in Japanese?
Probably not. I mean, we could write it in English and then Google Translate to the bottom and then just write it.
Yeah, Google Translate, and then we accidentally insult Mr. Yamazaki, and then...
Or we could just get a translator and pay them $1 amount, and they could do it for us. But to go back a bit, we talked about the song about pollution at the beginning a little bit, and there's some interesting dance club scenes that was also mentioned, and a bonfire at Mount Fuji, which I found very strange. So like when viewing this movie, did you guys find these scenes to affect your viewing experience anyway? Did it like add anything to the movie for you?
I will admit, like, some of the scenes were kind of just odd. Like, there's one scene in particular where the kid is on a roller coaster. Or is it this movie, actually? Is it?
Yeah, it's this one.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I was getting my movies mixed up for some reason. It's been a couple days since I watched it, but anyway,
they're both about a kid, so
yeah.
That's fair.
So because I was like, oh, I'm not confusing this with Godzilla versus Gigan, am I? Okay, but yeah, there's a scene in particular where like a kid's on a roller coaster, and then the frame just like freezes, and then we see like a black silhouette of Godzilla just off in the distance, and then like the scene continues. Like, I found like certain little scenes like that just to be a little weird. And then like, yeah, like there's the whole like dance club scene where everyone is like fish. Like, it's like, what's going on there?
I just wanted to add that I do find it kind of funny that in this movie, just whatever the kid said, they're like, "Oh yeah, that must be true. You must be right." Like, there's no questioning whether or not like the kid might be wrong or whatever, but like they just believe everything the kid says or thinks or anything. I just thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, they're just so ready to believe. It's like, oh, right, he must be right. Yeah. But just to really quickly finish up my thought real quick. Yeah, it's just like certain little scenes like that were just a little odd. And like I thought like the fight between Godzilla and Hedorah was kind of odd at times too, because I mean, I don't know if we were going to talk about it, but there's like Godzilla literally flies at one point using his atomic breath. Like that's just ridiculous. And then there's also this weird part where he pulls something out of Hedorah. I don't know what it is. It's like this white like circular thing. Is it his eyeball? Like I don't know. It's weird.
There's some debate about that. Some people say it's his eyes, but then later on in the movie when they're fighting, he still has his eyes. So we don't
exactly
really know.
Yeah, it's weird.
It could just be the orb alien nonsense because he is an alien, so who knows?
Maybe that was like the planned original death, but then they were like going through the dailies and they're like, no, that's too short. We got to extend this fight a bit more and we have to watch Godzilla fly. So then they extended it and then they're like, all right, well, we'll just keep it in.
Just to jump back a tiny bit before we talk about more in the battles and Hedorah's design and such. I just wanted to mention that this movie kind of has a blob kind of feel to it. And now that could be that I watched the 50s The Blob for the first time the day before I rewatched this movie. But you know, they're both from outer space. They're both kind of blobby creatures that kill people and turn them into skeletons or just completely disappear. And I feel like that part of Hedorah is kind of comes out of left field, and I feel the same way with these weird like 60s dance club scenes, especially the dance club scene where there's this lady, she's singing, and on the back wall there's like microscope view of blood pulsing, and then they turn into skeletons on the wall, and then the guy hallucinates fish people. Like, I want to know the thought process on why they picked these specific scenes. But I think these scenes add to the story in a way that allows this story to be a little darker. Because if it was just focused around the dad and the mom and the kid, I don't think they could get away with melting people. But because they have these weird psychedelic things in it, I feel like they could get away with melting people.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. It's definitely a possibility. I mean, again, I feel like some of this stuff kind of just plays into 70s sensibilities or stylistic choices, but yeah, I mean, again, I kind of liked some of the more gruesome and weird imagery that they used here, so I kind of enjoyed it, even though it was weird and whatnot. But I mean, that's just my taste.
Yeah, and I want to mention, because you mentioned how you liked some of the more like gruesome and dark imagery. I honestly think, now this is just how I feel, but I honestly think that's why this movie seems to have like kind of a big, well, not a big, but I feel like that's why this movie seems to have quite a few fans within the fan base, is because, yeah, it like has all this like darker imagery that's not seen in some of these other Godzilla movies. And I was thinking about this earlier, and it's like I made this like weird like observation in my head where it's like, you know how with superhero movies, like if a superhero movie or a comic book movie gets rated R, like people automatically start going, oh man, this movie's going to be great. It's R rated. That means there's going to be all types of great violence. We're going to see bones broken. Yeah, it's going to be like, people will just automatically start thinking that a superhero movie or a comic book movie is going to be great because like it has an R rating. I'm starting to feel like a lot of us Godzilla fans will just automatically like a Godzilla movie because it's dark and it has like, dark and serious imagery, like it shows death. Like, I don't know, like Godzilla fans sure do like it when Godzilla movies like kill people. And I don't know what that says about us.
I will just say on that note, just to clarify for me only, not anyone else, but like I'm definitely not that kind of person. I would say like this isn't rated R, and I still really liked the way that they were able to utilize like not just like Hedorah as like an interesting symbolic figure for like pollution and climate change and everything, and the effects that like mankind has on the world, but also like the imagery that came with it. So like I liked it just for that, just because I thought it was interesting and creative and unique. And while I like that they didn't shy away from trying to show the dangers, I guess, of that. So like the people dying and people becoming skeletons, or like even that one shot of I mean, I don't know if this is. I don't think so because they didn't become skeletons. But there's like another shot where like a little, like I think it's in the first fight with Hedorah and Godzilla, and he like slaps away a part of Hedorah on accident or whatever in their fight, and this like little ball of Hedorah like crashes into like this little bar, I think, and then that ends up like killing all these guys that are in there, and then they're just like covered, like they're just like drowned in sludge or oil, and like that was a pretty just random, like, oh wow, that's pretty crazy. But even just like stuff like that, like I appreciate they didn't shy away from showing that just because it's a kaiju movie or whatever. Because again, like I do feel like these movies kind of did transition to being more kids movies, and so again, like I just really like that this movie had something interesting and important to say, something that again is still relevant today, and did a good job of actually saying it and showing it, and going through with its message, and didn't try to compromise it to be more like a G-rated movie. But again, like it didn't need to be R, like they didn't need to be blood or anything. So like I definitely feel like I've gotten, like maybe when I was a teenager, like maybe that would have been more appealing to me. But I feel like I'm at the point where like, I mean, I do kind of end up just watching more PG-13 R-rated movies just because there's those kinds of movies have the subject matter that appeal most to me, just because those are the movies I tend to go see, I guess. But inherently it doesn't, a rated R movie doesn't mean it's going to be amazing or anything. So yeah, that's just, again, just my two cents on my behalf of this opinion.
Well, I just want to say real quick that when I said that, that's just, I mean, you just go online. That's literally like whenever like a Marvel project or DC project gets rated R, everybody in the comments is like, oh my God, this is going to be great. But you know what? It's funny, Udi, because you said when you were a teenager, yeah, that probably would have been a big thing for you. And I feel like that's probably what most of the people commenting are. So it makes sense.
Maybe, yeah. Like it depends on the project, because like Blade should be rated R because there should be a lot of blood, but that's besides the point. But yeah, I just figured I'd say for me in that case, but yes.
Some R-rated movies are only R-rated because they have so many curse words in it too. Like look at Baby Driver. There's not, okay, granted they're doing crime and there's a lot of gun violence in it, but like it's mostly an R-rated because of the cursing. So like really it just depends. You have to watch them. But I think they're ever going to make an R-rated Godzilla movie. I don't feel like that's on the table for Toho or the American ones even, because that would be really isolating to a lot of their audience. But I think this one is probably the more darker one, out of at least the ones that I've seen, where they do go more into that like PG-13, like we're gonna show people dying on screen, and it's not that other ones don't show that people are dying on screen, but usually it's more in the abstract. Like a building falls down and you can assume people are in there who have died, but they're not actually showing like dead people on like they're skeletons on the sidewalk while they're running away. So an interesting choice for this one.
Just to add to that, and to your point, Miranda, I don't really feel like it would be very hard for like even me. I feel like to come up with any reason that a Godzilla movie should be rated R. Like, I think to get to that point would be to get to a point of excessive violence, like gory, bloody violence, that I don't really feel like would feel very Godzilla-y. Or I guess like, yeah, if they had a lot of cursing, but even I feel like even excessive cursing would feel out of place in the Godzilla movie. Like, just seeing the work that they did on -1, I feel it kind of just proves like you don't need to be rated R to make a movie as powerful or resonant as a movie like that. So yeah, I don't really feel like you would ever need or you would have a reason to ever get to a rated R Godzilla movie.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, and I do agree with you guys. I don't think you need to have a rated R Godzilla movie. That being said, I personally wouldn't be opposed to one. Now, if we ever do get like let's say that does happen one day. I mean, we're freaking getting a rated R TMNT movie. And never did I think something like that would ever happen. So you never know. So let's say that we do get that one day where like we get a rated R Godzilla movie. Now I probably wouldn't be going, oh my God, this is going to be rated R, so it's going to be amazing. No, I wouldn't have that expectation. But I would be interested because I would be interested to see what that's like, because just because something's rated R, like you just said, Miranda, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to have gratuitous violence or a lot of blood, or it just depends. Because like I think how you could do a rated R Godzilla movie, like to do one, like once again, like Udi was saying, like you don't need to have like it just be gratuitous violence and gore. I think what you could do is, well, you could kind of go back to the 1954 film. Well, Godzilla releases radiation if you're around him. You could show the effects that radiation poisoning and sickness has on people. Like perfect example is the Chernobyl show that came out a couple years ago. Like, if you were to take a Godzilla movie and have somebody get exposed to radiation and show the effects that it has on the body, like in the Chernobyl show, I think that something like that could work in a Godzilla movie. But yeah, if you get Zack Snyder to direct a Godzilla movie and it's just Godzilla like killing and like beheading monsters with like excessive gore, it's like, okay, like does that really need to be in a Godzilla movie? So like I can understand it. I can understand like the arguments against it, but I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to seeing a project like that, because just out of general curiosity, I would just like to see what that would be like, and that's just my own curiosity at that point.
Yeah, and to that point, I agree. Like, if they ever did one, I would be open to it, but I don't really feel like it's necessary. But yeah, I'd be open to it.
It definitely would be interesting, and this is a interesting topic and thought to have. And I wasn't expecting that to be brought up in this conversation about a weird 70s film, but I would like to direct back to Hedorah's design. It has been mentioned a bit beforehand in our conversation, but I just want to talk about like how Hedorah is represented, because we see like these cartoon animated sections, which I was not expecting first time watching this movie, and he does have many different forms, with the exception of Mothra, who has her larva state and her moth state. Hedorah has like four forms. So that's a little more unique for this movie as well. And like for me, I really liked the little animations. They looked very 70s, and just thought they like fit perfectly with that time period, because well, they are from that time period. And they eventually show Hedorah's like states in these like illustrated color pencil drawings. And it was a fascinating way to show Hedorah's like states through like what you would find in a textbook. That little detail was really cool to me. But in general, I think the design they picked for Hedorah was very well suited for the type of creature this creature is. because Hedorah is basically toxic sludge or oil, pollution, gunk. It makes perfect sense for this character. Like sometimes kaiju designs don't really make sense. Kind of like Gabra in All Monsters Attack. He's like a giant green thing with red hair. Like that doesn't make sense, but like Hedorah's design does make sense in this case. And here's a fun fact, I guess. The Hedorah suit is one of the heaviest suits they've ever made. And it was so heavy that they had to have strings and stuff to hold it up so the suit actor could walk around. So
That does not surprise me.
I know, yeah, we've talked about how heavy the Godzilla suits can get, but let's see, I have the exact number. Give me 2 seconds. Yeah, the Hedorah suit weighed around 300 pounds. So that's kind of crazy. But overall, the design was really well designed.
Yeah, I did kind of touch on Hedorah's design earlier, and I do agree. I do like the design because, I don't want, at the risk of repeating myself, I do like the design. I think it's unique. I think it's interesting. It's not something up to this point we've ever really seen before in a Godzilla movie. And I would like to see another shot at Hedorah. Like I want to see him return in a future Godzilla movie. I think that could be cool.
Yeah, I thought it was very well done. I think you guys basically hit everything I could possibly say about it. But yeah, I mean, I think it perfectly encapsulates the feeling of pollution and sludge and garbage on the ocean, oil spills on covering an animal, like something like that. Like it very much has that sort of visual aesthetic to it. So yeah, I think they did a really great job of creating a monster around that look and that feel.
I just remembered a detail because you've been mentioning oil, and Hedorah is sparkly. He sparkles because he's shiny, and like oil slicks are shiny and stuff. So, wow, I never put those things together. That makes total sense.
Now that you mentioned it, I also kind of forgot that he was shiny, but yeah. Yeah, that is an interesting detail. Like I remember as soon as you said, I'm like, oh yeah, he is shiny. They showed that off a lot and like towards the end of the movie, but yeah, on the note of when you were giving your thoughts, Miranda, I thought it was a little clever, I think unintentionally, that you were like, it was pretty well suited, and I was like, because they're wearing a suit.
Oh, okay. Wow. That was unintentional, but good job, me.
I was like, Miranda would say that on purpose. She didn't in this case, but she would. But yeah, so yeah, I'll wrap it up with my thoughts because you guys covered pretty much everything. But yeah, I thought it was very well done, and I really liked the very vibrant and prominent red eyes and a lot of the imagery used with it. Like I thought the shots of Hedorah huffing the smokestacks was pretty interesting. I mean, just they did I don't know what they did with that, or I don't know what the smokestacks were actually emitting, but it looked like pollution, so they did a good job of that. But yeah, I think they really nailed a lot of the aesthetics here. I mean, Goji Suit is a little lacking, but other than that, I think they nailed all the aesthetics that they needed to.
Just want to say real quick to comment on what you said. Hedorah's getting high off of those smokestacks, inhaling them.
He's getting high off of his own supply.
And there you go.
It's more like the human supply, but still.
Yeah. Yeah, really quickly, because I usually do this for whenever we review a Toho Godzilla movie. Yeah, because you just commented on the suit, Udi. I didn't really comment on the suits for these movies. Well, I mean, there's really not much to say about All Monsters Attack because once again, most of it's stock footage. Although they do film a new scene with Godzilla in it for that movie, and I mean the suit looks okay. Nothing special, nothing worse either. The suit is all right in Godzilla versus Hedorah. His face at times kind of reminds me of like, I don't know, like a Gila monster or something, like just kind of like just a regular lizard, which makes sense because it's Godzilla, he's a reptile. But still, this face especially for some reason just really reminds me of like a lizard or whatever. So, but I mean, the suit looks okay. And it doesn't look bad. It's better than like Son of Godzilla, that's for sure.
Speaking of the face, I really like the close-up shots towards the end of the movie, like in the big final, like long prolonged battle, where there's like a couple of moments where there's like a fake out, like, oh, did he finally kill Hedorah? And then Godzilla's look like it's just a close-up of Godzilla's face, and he's like, "Are you dead? You better be." And then like Hedorah flies away. Is like, "God dang it!" And then he like goes and chases him. And then again, like he kills him, like seemingly. And then you get another close up, and it's just like, "Yeah, you better be dead."
Yeah.
Speaking of that, and Godzilla making sure Hedorah is dead, how did Godzilla know to shoot his laser breath at the giant panels that has the electricity? Like, how did he know to do that?
Because the plot demanded it.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, yeah,
Maybe
the
he's
plot
just
did
really
demand
smart.
it. Maybe.
But I mean, yeah. Otherwise, I don't really know. I had that thought too, and I was like, okay. I mean, I guess it worked out that they're working together, but I don't know how he would know that he needed to power the electricity walls up. But sure,
Goji's a smart boy. He can think of it.
I
He
guess.
used his own intuition.
I suppose. I do. I mean, I guess he's just lucky that the electricity didn't hurt him. I mean, I guess he's been electrocuted before, but I guess it's good that whatever form of electricity or whatever heightened power that they created in that device thing didn't hurt him at all. Pretty convenient.
It is pretty convenient. But I did have a thought. Maybe, although I'm pretty sure the kid didn't know the plan, but maybe the kid used his telepathic power, future viewing, Godzilla connected powers to tell him.
Maybe.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I'm pretty sure that concept shows up later on somewhere in the franchise. Do we have anything else to add about Godzilla versus Hedorah?
Did you guys like seeing Godzilla fly?
I mean, it's an iconic scene. Like, this movie brought us one of the best Godzilla fighting techniques, so it's great.
Yeah.
It was again not what I was expecting. So when it happened, I was like, "Oh, okay, all right, sure."
When it happened, dude, you're just like, all right, guess we're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, he flies now. All right, he flies now.
He flies now. He flies now.
Okay, so that was our conversation on Godzilla versus Hedorah, and now it's time for the lizard fact of the day. Today's lizard is the giant salamander. These fully aquatic salamanders are the largest living amphibians on Earth. They are native to China, Japan, and eastern United States. They feed at night on a diet of fish and crustaceans. They can get up to 5.9 feet long or 1.8 meters. So I picked the giant salamander today because he reminds me of Hedorah in like a nice way. But that's the lizard fact of the day, so let's get into our ratings. Udi, what would you give All Monsters Attack?
Before rating All Monsters Attack, I just wanted to double check my score for Son of Godzilla because I was like, well, I definitely think that this movie is better than that one. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't rate it that low. And again, I really don't think it's that bad of a movie. I just don't think it's like a great movie. It's fine. It's fun. It's cute. So I'm gonna give it, just because I have to rate it higher, which I'm surprised I even gave it a 2. That feels a little generous. I don't know. I'm gonna go with a 2.5. Why not? I gave Son of Godzilla a 2, so that's why I'm giving All Monsters Attack a 2.5.
That's fair. Dan, what's your rating?
Yeah, so I'm gonna be a little generous with All Monsters Attack because I want to be harsher because I really do think this is like one of the weakest Godzilla movies. But it was something that was made for children. It is really short, so with that respect, I'm also just well, Udi gave it a 2.5, but I'm going to give it a 2. I'm going to give it a 2. I wanted to rate it lower at first, but I really thought about it and I was like, I am being just a little overly harsh because yeah, it was made for kids. It's an hour long. It's really not that bad, but I just think it can be a little lazy at times with all the stock footage. So, but yeah, I'm going to give it a 2.
Okay, that's also fair. Y'all not gonna like my rating because I'm giving it a 3.
It's not that bad.
But again,
Yeah, I mean,
my
it's-
rating. Sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, it's only 0.5 higher than mine, so I mean that's fine.
Yeah, that is true. But I rate these movies subjectively, not objectively. So
If you would have given it a 4, Miranda, then I would have to have a talk with you.
okay.
I'm just messing with you. You rate movies however the heck you want. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. So our Atomic Lizard's average score for All Monsters Attack is a 2.5. Next up, Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Udi, what is your rating?
This is a hard one. I feel like I need to rewatch this and Destroy All Monsters to properly, I feel like, give a solid rating. Because I feel like I liked the messaging so much and a lot of the imagery that came along with Hedorah and everything like that. I liked that aspect so much. Compared to so many of these movies, I just feel like it was really cool to have one of these. Like, and again, maybe because I wasn't expecting it, and so it stood out so much more to me. But just to like have this movie actually have something to say and not just be about big kaiju fighting. Which, again, nothing wrong with that. That's what I was expecting. But to just have something important to say again was cool. So like the movie I'm conflicted on is like Kong Skull Island and like Destroy All Monsters, because like those are more just like big kaiju fighting movies. So you know what? Screw it. This is probably I'm probably going to change this in the future. But for the time being, why not? I'm going to be extra generous. I'm going to give Godzilla vs. Hedorah a 4.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that for now. And if I ever change it, I change it. But for now, I'll go with 4.
I was not expecting that.
That is very generous. Yeah.
So Dan, what is your score?
I didn't really enjoy this movie as much as you two did, but I also don't think it's terrible. Like I said, I just found it kind of boring at times, but that's just me. I do appreciate the environmental message it has to say. I like Hedorah's design. I like how they have fun with Godzilla flying and then like all the weird imagery with the fish people, and I like the pollution song and whatnot. But once again, I just thought this one got a little boring at times. So I'm going to give it a 3. I personally don't think it's on the same level as like Kong Skull Island or Destroy All. I mean, I think I like Destroy All Monsters a little more, but that movie's really only good with the big battle at the end. But yeah, but I mean, not calling you out or anything, Udi. I'm just comparing it to the two movies
How dare
that you. Yeah, no, I'm just comparing it to the two movies that you brought up. So, but yeah, I'm gonna give it a 3. I'm going to give it a 3 because, yeah, I appreciate the message that it has. And I know a lot of people really do like this movie, but I just personally didn't find it that great.
A 3 is pretty solid because I'm also giving it a 3. So the average atomic lizard score for Godzilla vs. Hedorah is a 3.333 repeating. We kind of modified our rounding system, so we're going to round this up to a 3.5. These scores make perfect sense in my mind. Hopefully they make sense to you guys as well. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to our conversation on All Monsters Attack and Godzilla vs. Hedorah. If you're interested in hearing more, check out our previous episodes. And as always, you can find us on Instagram at Atomic Lizards Pod and on Letterboxd at Atomic_Lizards.